and this is Elisabeth Hendrickson. Welcome.
Howdy.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. So, your keynote today.
Yeah.
So, word on the street is testing's dead. How do you respond to that?
Great.
Testing
Great
is only
response.
dead if you're looking for the thing that was called testing in 1998. It's not dead. It's very much alive. It's so important that it's pervasive. It's even more places than it was before. Testing is thriving. It just looks different.
And in what sense? What's different about it?
Well, one of the things that's different is that everybody tests. So it used to be that you would have, I ran QA departments. You used to have a siloed QA department of people who were the designated testers. And if I would sit in meetings, I was at an executive level in the last company that I worked for as an employee, and I would sit in meetings and somebody would say, blah, 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 test. And my little radar would go up because that meant it was going to be my job.
Pay attention.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. At
Right,
that moment,
right.
that's my problem. And what I see now, as a consultant, I go into organizations that are transitioning to Agile, and what I'm seeing now more and more is that everybody is testing. So programmers are doing testing, product owners are doing testing, and testing is now part of the overall culture. And it just looks different the way that we talk about testing. They're not talking about boundary value analysis or equivalence class partitioning or all pairs when we're talking about developer testing. But we are talking about, in each case, it's an example of activities designed to get empirical evidence about the extent to which our expectations are being met along some dimension.
Right. And this was something that we actually spoke about on a couple of podcasts not that long ago, which is the role of the software tester is expanding out a bit, which isn't that big of a surprise for a lot of people. But I'm sure there are a group of people out there that say, well, what do you mean it's different? I mean, it's still the testing department. That's still what we do. Any suggestions for folks in that model of the direction to get out of it?
To get out of that mindset?
Yes. Where do you start?
Well, with the recognition that change is happening. So even if change hasn't already come to your organization, even if you still have a testing department, one of the big trends that I'm seeing in all of my clients across all industries and all sizes of clients is that organizations that had traditional, separate, siloed, isolated test departments are increasingly folding their testers into their development teams. So even in organizations that you would think were going to keep that separate, independent test department, they're not. So that whole notion of test is separate and it must report up through a quality organization that reports up through a different, that was a whole wrong turn that our industry took. In it really became popular like in the mid-90s. People were talking about it in the late 80s, but it became popular in the mid-90s, and so everybody separated their testers out into separate departments with separate managers. Huh?
It's safer that way.
It's safer. I don't think that was actually their motivation. It was, they talked about the fox watching the hen house. But increasingly what organizations are finding is that separating that out increases the length of the feedback loops, and it means that you'll end up with test results coming back months after a given change was made. But now we're talking about development cycles and releasing within a month in most even if they're not officially doing Agile, the release cycles are shortening. So getting out of the mindset, I would say don't get too complacent or comfy with this notion that you're going to have your separate test department for time immemorial. There's a good chance that change is headed your way.
Right. Now, with the change in departments and kind of pushing people into like the development teams, what does that say about the skills that a tester is going to need to have?
So it's kind of interesting because I have a different opinion from the trend. My opinion is that testers bring stuff to the table, and what they're bringing is a set of attributes and skills. They're curious, they're analytical, they have an ability to, many testers intuitively kind of know where the bugs are, and they have this ability to discover them and then communicate about them. Or even if it's not about bugs, at least to be able to characterize the capabilities and limitations of a product. Now, that's something I expect of any tester, no matter what kind of team structure we're talking about. And so when they get folded into the development organization, I expect them to bring that to the table. And so it's just that we get that tighter collaboration and good groovy learning from each other, and it's all cool. But what I'm increasingly finding with organizations is that as the testers are being folded into the development development departments, they're also expecting those testers to become more like a software development engineer in test. So the whole SDET thing, that role of SDETs, that is now pervasive throughout all kinds of organizations. And it's to the point where looking at job ads, and I've now done a survey of job ads, not asking people's opinion, but actually looking at the job ads. In 2010 and 2011, I did studies looking at the requirements for jobs, and what we're seeing is that like 80 to 85% of the testing or QA individual contributor jobs out there say that programming is either a required skill or a nice to have skill. So in terms of employability, pretty much it's not me saying that we need this. I totally think that if you try to force fit good testers into being programmers and they don't want to, if they don't want to do that, that it's taking somebody who otherwise could have been an amazing contributor as a tester and force fitting them into something that's not going to fit for them, and they're not going to perform as well for the organization. No matter what I think, that is the trend.
Right.
So this is something you mentioned along this lines, the coding versus non-coding, and the note that I wrote down was getting a job versus the actual job itself.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that a lot of people run into, and they're starting to get scared off out of the industry, or folks who are really good at software testing are in a position where they feel like they need to learn coding but don't really want to.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, I'm a great tester, but I don't want to have to do this other stuff. Any advice for folks like that might be looking for work or might be able to maybe pick up some, coding skills or something along that line?
Well, it hurts my soul to think that there are people who would otherwise be an awesome fit getting scared away by something. And so I think that what I hope is that they can approach it as a grand adventure. I know that sounds so trite. It's not a problem. It's an opportunity.
Hey!
Oh, I must be a management consultant.
Management.
You're right. But seriously, the communities and resources to support people learning programming are so much better today than they were even just 5 years ago. Code Academy, I think it's codeacademy.com. I'm looking at you guys like you'll know.
Yes, I believe.
It's either .com or .org.
Yep.
That there's great tutorials that are interactive and give you immediate feedback about how well you got it, and contrast that with when I learned how to code back in the 1980s. And the feedback from the instructor would be like 2 weeks later on my code. And so now we're seeing really fast feedback loops, which makes it easier to learn. There's meetups. We're in the San Francisco Bay Area right now, and there is both a San Francisco based and a South Bay based women who code meetups that are specifically targeted to get women coding, get more women into the technology side of things. And so just the meetup groups and so many resources, so many community members who want to reach out and help people, not just women, but that one came to mind.
Right.
So I would say, it might not be your first choice, but if you haven't ever actually tried and you're just kind of scared of it because it looks like it's scary, you might actually enjoy it more than you think you will.
Right, and it's kind of nice to learn the lingo and be able to communicate with developers. And, it's nice to be able to know enough to be dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Is my philosophy. And it's one of the things...
It's so funny that you said that.
Know enough to be dangerous?
Yes, because Adam Goucher has his thing of just enough Python to be dangerous.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I know a lot. I know a little about a lot is usually the other way I frame that. Right? As a tester,
sure.
I know a little networking. I know a little this, know a little that. Yeah, that sort of thing. One of the other things that I took note of during your keynote was this is the note I have, which is not really doing this any justice.
Now I can't wait to hear what this note is.
It's the test versus check chart.
Oh, checking versus exploring.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is there a way that you can explain that to the folks that might be watching at home and at least make the distinction? I know that Michael Bolton was in the room and there was some checking. Not that long ago, he had a post about checking, and I believe that you were the pioneer of that.
Oh, well, I'm not going to claim to be the pioneer. Okay, so Michael wrote a blog post for those people who didn't see the streamed keynote. Michael wrote a blog post about what he called testing versus checking, and making the distinction between an investigative and human-centric process where we discover information that's interesting versus just running through a checklist and saying, yeah, check, I pushed the button and I filled in the value in the field and da-da-da-da. He wrote that post in August of 2009. And a lot of people have widely credited him with making that distinction. And so I had this totally self-serving slide in my slide deck with a quote of a tweet that I tweeted in May 2009, that we should do away with the word testing altogether and just go with the words check and explore to explain the distinction between these two activities. But I'm not going to claim that that was the first time anyone ever said that.
Oh, come on.
It's on record.
Come on now. We've got this on film, so to speak.
Right.
So now's your chance. That's right.
No, I just, set the record straight that I did have my 2 cents in there very early in that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so something that I noticed was you talked about, and I have it as a quote, is we're not just testers. So you talked a little bit about how testers can add value and what you expect from a tester.
Yeah.
But from a tester's perspective, you branched out and you said, okay, you're not leaving the testing world by doing these other things.
Right.
You're actually adding value. And
Right.
what sorts of examples have you run into that fill that category? And talk a little bit about the fact that you're not trading in your tester card.
Well, so one thing is just as testers, we frequently, a thinking tester on a project will find themselves doing work that looks and smells like this is business analyst work or this is project management work. And that's just part of being a tester. We end up being on projects frequently the force that kind of fills in the gaps between all of the functions. When I was a test manager, I found myself facilitating meetings an awful lot of the time because that was how we were going to manage to get the information conveyed. And I was still doing that under the umbrella of from a test management perspective. But what I actually meant, and I think I somehow managed to not say this clearly at all, is that if you were, and I'm not suggesting anybody does, but if you were to leave testing as a job and take a role with a different title, you are not turning in your tester card. And so, for example, there was one point where I was working for a company and I'd been running the test department, and the biggest problems we had, though, were in project management. And the head of project management, that he resigned, and so the role opened up, and we started interviewing candidates. And I at the time had the role of director of quality engineering. Don't be too impressed by the title; it wasn't actually that impressive. But I was at that director level in that company, and we were hiring another director, and so I had to go to all these interviews. And the more I talked with candidates for the job, the more I realized, I think that I'd be a better fit than this person that I'm talking to, and I think I'd really enjoy it. And so I ended up taking on that role, and we were going to hire another director of quality engineering, and I was going to move into that role. And I ended up leaving the company actually before that, and the company's dead now. So it's all actually a very tragic and sad story.
Very sad.
But coming back to the actual point, I was going to turn in my test card, but then I realized that really I'm taking all those same skills that I've been honing for years, and I'm taking those same attributes that I have of relentless curiosity, I'm applying them in a different way. And so that's really what I meant by you don't have to turn in your tester card. You're a member for life.
You can't get out.
You can't get out.
Is it like Hotel California?
Exactly. You can check out, but you can never leave.
Fair enough. Now, along those lines, testers don't have to turn in their cards by moving into other areas. In that same sense, you talked about developers also doing testing.
Right.
Which I like to say all the time. And so how do you encourage testing amongst developers, and what's your reaction to folks that say, "Oh no, developers are there to write code. They can't test. It's impossible. They are not testers."
Just in case the camera's not picking up my facial expression, I want to be really clear how badly I'm rolling my eyes right now. Like
the wincing, yes.
Yeah, if we've got the notion, so Ben Kelly gave this great talk on zombie testers. That's the zombie developer. I don't test. I just write code. And okay, well, buddy, or. How do you even know that your code did what you intended, much less what anybody else values in the product, if you're not testing at all? So My response to that kind of depends on who's telling me and the attitude with which they're telling me, but the bottom line is I have no patience for a programmer who wants to tell me that, but I'm a programmer and I'm too special to test. I just have no patience with that. That was an interesting expression on your face, Tim.
Yeah, I was thinking about what was going on in an organization I've been with, and I've had them tell me I'm too expensive to test and stuff like that. And so I don't know if that was similar to the same thing, but it felt...
Do they have any idea what my rates are?
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point. I don't think they had any idea what mine were either.
See?
Right. But
it's so cute that you think you're paid more than me. Isn't that?
Right.
That's so cute.
Right.
Well, he tries.
But it can't... It came off as the same thing.
No, I don't
too
mean
special.
Tim. I mean the developer.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm too expensive. Really? It's so cute, Mr. Developer or Ms. Developer, that you think you're paid more than me. But
Right.
anyway, I'm sorry,
Right.
Tim. You were saying.
No. I mean, the end ended with, or the thought was like, he said more expensive, but it came through as the same type of thing. Like, I'm
Right.
more special, or something like that.
More specialer.
Right. Exactly.
I understand.
Yeah.
So it totally related with me is what that expression was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, more often I hear it from managers, actually. So I don't get it as much from individual programmers because it turns out that an awful lot of individual programmers have been testing surreptitiously sometimes because their organizations weren't supporting it. But then when I get introduced to an organization these days, usually it's because they're doing an agile transition. So now they're talking about whole team testing and all of that other good, groovy group hug kind of stuff. So at that point, what I hear is managers expressing the concern, but wait a minute, we've got these programmers, and what are the testers going to be doing if the programmers are doing all the testing? And that's where we can have a different conversation about, okay, let's talk about the difference between checking and exploring, and let's talk about what a professional tester brings to the table, and you still need that. So don't think that you can get rid of all of your testers, but let's also talk about, as a programmer, before I check in that line of code, I'd better have written unit tests around it. I'd better have executed all of those unit tests. I'm practicing continuous integration, so I've done the local merge, run all the unit tests, see them green, so that at the moment that I check in, I have no reason to believe I have busted anything.
Right.
That's what a professional programmer does these days, and it's a total change from 1998. So it comes back to everything has changed, but a programmer who is not at the very least doing that these days, I don't think they're qualified to write production code because that's the standard.
Right. Agreed. One of the kind of last topics that we want to talk about tonight is business need versus tester needs. So one of the things that I've been harping on lately is the business needs, and I think that is kind of a theme over the last year is business value, business need. What does the business need? Tester, you need to be focusing on what the business needs, not on what you want to do. So what's your take on business needs versus tester needs?
Whatever you said, it sounds like I totally agree with you. In all seriousness, one of the most valuable things that I've found that a tester can do, and so do we have time for me to tell a quick story?
You bet.
Go for it.
So there was, I'm allowed to tell this story. I got permission, so I can name the company. The company is Pivotal Labs. They are so awesome because when I work with a Pivotal Labs team, I know that I'm going to get software that basically does what it's supposed to do, and I might explore it and find something interesting, but it's not a target-rich environment. It's not like I start exploring and I go bug. It's like I start exploring and I'm like, man, I'm not finding anything interesting that you guys didn't already address. So,
Right.
So in one way, it's kind of frustrating. But they had this particular project at the time that they were taking Pivotal Tracker from a free thing that anybody could use to a paid subscription model thing. They had done a ton of work, but they started getting a little nervous because this is a huge shift. We're taking payment now for something we've never taken payment for before. So they called me up and they said, okay, we would love it if you could come in for just a couple days. We think we've got all of the bases covered, but just tell us what you can find. Part of the first engaging with the team was to sit down with a product owner and say, help me understand what you're concerned about. So we spent a good solid half an hour aligning on what risks was she worried about. I already knew the product well enough to have a conversation with her about, okay, look, I could imagine exploring in these areas around projects and users and whatever. And she said, I don't care about that. Even if it's broken, it's been broken for a while if it is broken.
Right.
Not that we think it is, but just don't even bother going there. And what we did together, we collaboratively came up with an initial set of charters, and then I went off and did the sessions. That's what I think of when I hear you talking about what the business needs, the collaborative creation of the charters before I even go off exploring ensured that I was always on target for the kind of information they were going to value and be able to act on right away.
And not testing things they don't care about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of important, I think.
Yeah.
Not everybody feels that way, but you can't win them all, right?
Yeah. Hey, they were happy.
Do you find that it's sometimes hard, and maybe depending on who you talk to get that type of information?
Oh, well, sure. Sometimes they don't even know what they care about.
Right.
This is one of the reasons why I think that whoever's in that role of specifying what the system should do, who I'll call that role the product owner, and that's the term that agile teams have pretty much adopted, but it might be a business analyst or a product manager or whatever. That role is really super hard. I mean, I said the role of tester is hard, but I think being a good product owner is even harder because you have to distill the cacophony of conflicting demands that are coming at you into a cohesive vision and then communicate that vision very clearly. And to be able to do that, super, super hard. So being good at that is important. I think that one of the things that testers can bring to the table that is one of those get outside the comfort zone box kind of things is where you've got a product owner who's not succeeding real well at that very difficult aspect of their job, to help elicit from them what do you care about? And there are a variety of ways that we can do this. We can say, okay, well, let's imagine that I did a bunch of testing and I found bugs that looked like this. Would you care? And you're asking them to kind of project themselves into the future and imagine the bug triage meeting that we're going to have in a month's time.
Right.
And would you care about that? So stuff like that, I think, is something that we can do to help those product owners. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting challenge when they aren't succeeding.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. We got anything else for her tonight?
I don't.
I don't.
But I had a great time.
Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. And great talk today, by the way.
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you
If
so
we
much.
haven't said it before. So hopefully we'll see you next year for Cast 2013.
Awesome.
Don't
Yes.
know
Looking
where
forward
it's
to
going to
it.
be,
Yeah.
but it will exist.
That hasn't been announced yet?
No.
It hasn't been
technically
decided
not.
Hasn't
yet?
been
Technically
decided
not.
yet. Suspense filled.
Do
Ooh.
That's right.
we want to? Oh shoot! What's the word? Do we want to give hints of where it could be?
We could, but let's let her go first.
I guess so. All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you.
It
for
was
joining
great
us.
having you.
Great,
Appreciate
great
it.
being here. Thanks.